That boy used a forbidden reincarnation spell after being betrayed by his friends, and now, 20 years later, he has returned in a weaker body, blows that obliterated all the creatures in his path. Witnessing the scene, the swordsman remarked that it was unbelievable that he was confronting so many monsters single-handedly. Other problems. Before entering the portal, he thanks the guard for his concern, while the guard watches him depart. Immediately, the official turns towards the group, asking them to please follow that boy. He explains that letting him go alone is suicide, but the leader of the group shows no interest whatsoever. One of the boys ask why they should do that, but the purple-haired guy responds that it could actually be a good thing for them. He continues, hinting at what they might do if nobody was watching them. With a smile, the boy concludes that if something were to happen to Kyosuke, it wouldn't be a problem at all. With that, the trio runs towards the portal, yelling that the stuck-up brat needs another 100 years of training, making everyone believe they were going to help. The guard appreciated the gesture and said that he was counting on them to assist. Inside the portal, the trio advanced down the dark corridor of the dungeon. It was then that the leader revealed the true. They would proceed as usual, eliminating the boy and blaming the monsters for what happened. He commented that idiots like him were perfect as bait. With a cynical smile, he displayed a sack full of objects, concluding that this was how he lined his own pockets. Without wasting time, they hurriedly ran in search of their target. 10 minutes passed, and the chase was already leaving them breathless. Even running in a straight line, they still hadn't managed to catch up to the boy. It was then that one of them pointed forward and shouted. Before their eyes, Yosuke was facing terrifying monsters, each one bigger than him. Immediately, the cultivator explained that, with her time magic, she could see the future and foresee the movements of the monsters. She then concluded that the Bringtans, his eyes glowed with newly awakened power as he faced the enemies head-on. Without hesitation, he launched a powerful wave of fire, incinerating some of the creatures. He immediately gathered a distinct energy in his hand. With a gesture, he merged the two powers into a single, devastating attack. The explosion annihilated all the monsters on the field of battle. When the dust settled, only he remained standing amidst the rubble. Stunned, the group leader asked how a single person could have only defeated a D-rank monster. But before he could get an answer, the red-haired boy pointed to something on the ground. It was a rare object, and he was already calculating that its sale would guarantee a comfortable life for 6 months. One of the accomplices commented, satisfied, that the brat hadn't even noticed the value of that yet. For them, the plan was clear. As soon as they eliminated Kyosuke, the object would be theirs. Without hesitation, the three moved forward to attack. Both subordinates ran to the front while the leader watched on. At the exact moment, he shouted for them to finish the boy off right there and then. But Yosuke he murmured as if disapproving of the entire situation. He looked up, questioning if they really thought they were being clever. Easily dodging the blows, he reflected that, no matter the era, there would always be worms trying to steal what belongs to others. Surprised by his words, the two asked how he managed to dodge without even looking. The leader shouted that it was pure luck, and furious, launched a blast of fire from behind. He ordered him to die at once, immediately. With coldness, that man was no longer human. Meanwhile, more creatures continued to emerge from the portal in the middle of the city. After defeating the entire horde, the magician, Yosuke channeled energy into his fist. In an instant, he landed a direct blow to the boy's abdomen. The impact was so strong that the leader fell unconscious. At that very moment, his body flew through the air, violently colliding with the wall, which was destroyed several meters inward. As the dust settled, there he was, lying on the ground with his legs up in the air, and the structure completely destroyed. Observing the result, Yosuke declared that he would have no mercy for scum like that. He stated that he would use each and every one of them as a stepping stone, without hesitation, with the aura of his power pulsing intensely around him. Of his body, he made a promise. His revenge began right there. Outside, the portal remains open in front of the school. Shortly after, a new -ace person enters the dungeon. Iwao's subordinate, Joy, reveals that he came there upon learning that a student from the academy had entered, only to stumble upon fallen rookie hunters, wondering why they would be dead there. Faced with the scene, Sudai questions what the hell happened. That place. Later that night, the scene shifts to an apartment. In his room, Yosuke reflects on how he managed to level up and test his magic in the D-rank dungeon. Level and try out his magic. He then looks at his ID, revealing that his new spell is called Information Darkness. With it, he explains that he can not only fake his level, but also erase entry logs, concluding that it's very useful. Lying in his bed, He comments on how tomorrow will be his. Turned to face one last monster near the portal and said, "Good." Concluding his sentence after cutting its throat, he wondered if that was the last one. Then, first day at the academy, when he notices something on his cell phone, he immediately sees unread messages from the previous day, demanding money and calling him incessantly. A tribute. Reading the taunts, he understands the situation and disdains what he sees. The next morning, several students arrive at the academy's courtyard. As he walks, he hears a voice calling out to him from behind. His classmate, i.e. Karin, greets him with a good morning and asks if he's feeling better. Feel better. He appreciates her concern and says that he's fine now. As the girl tells him how worried she was, Yosuke notices that the original owner of that body had people who cared about him. Suddenly, a voice interrupts them, mocking the attributeless student who barely escaped death. The group leader approaches and says that, for protecting a weak level 1, he should receive something in exchange. With a smile, the boy goes on to say that he's short on cash, and Kyosuke definitely brought what he needed. Just then, he remembers the messages and realizes it must be those scoundrels who sent them. However, Karin intervenes and asks them to stop, explaining that he had just been discharged from the hospital. The girl's hand is visibly shaking as she holds onto the strap of her bag. Yosuke notices this as he assesses the situation, gesturing with his hand as he steps forward to address them. He thanks her for the help, but assures her that he will be all right. One of the guys scoffs, telling him not to act tough in front of a woman, especially since he's just a nobody without any special abilities. He affirmed that with this, he would be able to protect the peace of the people. He immediately declared loudly that he would seal the portal. However, he was. The group leader then threatens him, saying he'll remind him that he's a useless guy who can't even use magic. In response, Yosuke declares that they are them who need to be reminded of their place. In his mind, he promises the body's former owner that he can rest easy because he will make his name be known throughout the world as the strongest adventurer, loudly declaring that he is a man who keeps his word. The aggressor's face twitches in fury. One of the boys asks what nonsense he's spouting as he prepares a fire attack. Immediately, Karen exclaims that that's impossible, because using magic outside of the dungeons goes against the school rules. The blonde boy, however, orders him to shut up, yelling that the one without talent or attribute is in the wrong for trying to challenge him. With that, he launches the fireball in Kyosuke's direction, yelling at him to receive the attack. The boy watches the approaching magic without showing any reaction. He then concentrates the same fire energy in his hand and deflects it. Spell, only with an even greater sphere of power. In the sequence, the two fire attacks collide in mid-air. The collision of the spells generates a huge explosion in the yard. At that moment, the other two boys wonder if that wasn't the same magic, questioning since when he's been capable of using it. In the middle of the smoke, the leader of the group barely manages to ask a question, then confronts him and dismissively asks if that's all he's got. Without. Surprised to receive a magical attack that struck him from behind, sending him skidding several meters into the portal. Fallen, he observed knowing how to react, the boy just curses the situation. In desperation, the bully yells at his friends not to stand there and finish him off once and for all. He nods. With that, the two assailants launch their water and wind attacks, asking him what he thinks. However, Yosuke also casts magic, water and wind, completely nullifying the two attacks directed at him. The group is left in disbelief, wondering how many magical attributes he can use, because they have never heard of anything like that. With a cold voice, Yosuke then asks if they are satisfied yet. Immediately, he raises his finger and states that now it is his turn. As a huge aura of fire forms around him, he tells them not to worry, because at least it won't kill them. The attackers scream in terror, with one of them trying to call for help, but in vain. Suddenly, he grabs the leader by the shoulder and asks, what did they do when the forking? The former Kyosuke asked for help, not waiting for a response, and continuing to say that he didn't really need to hear their answer anyway. With that, he tightly grips the boy's face. As he lifts him into the air, he states that worms like him always say the same things anyway. Then, he declares that, therefore, no matter what the boy says, it will not stop his flaming fist from hitting him squarely. Immediately, he throws a powerful punch into the face of the road aggressor. The blow lands with full force, knocking out the leader on the spot. The impact of the punch sends all three attackers flying away, causing them to fall. Portal after being ensnared by the chains of a magical seal. Not understanding anything, he indignantly wondered what was happening. Then, he realized that he had never violently to the ground. With that, the group leader is left lying and smoking on the asphalt, completely defeated. As she watches the scene, Karen he manages to murmur her name. Kyosuke faces the fallen attackers and declares that, from this moment on, no one will ever look down on him again. With a determined smile, he concludes that together, they will walk the path to becoming the strongest adventurer. As they walk away, the attackers begin to scream, apologizing profusely. At the same time, the group leader murmurs that he completely changed after being discharged from the hospital. With an air of disdain, Kyosuke comments that, in the end, the boy was no big deal after all. As he and Karen walk down the hallway, all the other students watch them in silence. The news of the confrontation seems to have spread quickly, attracting attention wherever he goes. Because of this, he wonders if he ended up standing out too much. Suddenly, a hand is placed on his shoulder, and a voice asks if he has a moment, questioning if he is who they think he is, without clarifying who the boy is. He hears the stranger asking if he has time to talk. Noticing that the man appears to be a veteran, Yosuke considers this to be an annoyance and thinks about simply ignoring him. He quickly tries to excuse himself, saying that class is about to begin. However, the veteran interrupts him, saying that, on second thought, he hasn't actually introduced himself yet. With an imposing stance, he introduces himself as Yoi Chitsudai, the leader of the Biting. Seen a future like that before. Turning to his companions, he questioned why they had done that, and if they were all involved in this scheme. The cat group. Confused, Karen simply repeats the group's name in the form of a question. Biting the cat? At that moment, Yosuke remembers that name. The clan that Director Ibako created. As he tries to continue toward the living room, Sudai calls him again, asking the same question once more. With a smile, the veteran insists that he can spare him some of his time. Can't he? Yosuke stops and turns his face, considering the proposal. He immediately turns toward the boy and says that, if that's the case, it seems there's nothing to be done. Sudai then gets straight to the point, asking if he was the one who defeated the adventurers found in the dungeon the night before. Pretending not to understand, Yosuke simply asks what he's talking about. However, he questions how the boy found out, since that information should have been kept secret. The veteran explains that he was informed a student had entered the dungeon, so he decided to investigate, revealing that inside he discovered infamous criminals known for preying on newbies. Besides, Sudai finishes by saying that he had been using multi-attribute magic that morning. Yosuke then realizes that this means the boy doesn't know the details of his magic. Losing patience, the veteran demands that he speak once and for all and confirm if he was the one who defeated them. In response, Yosuke states that, since he was suddenly attacked that morning, he doesn't quite remember what happened. Showing his ID, he concludes that he is only level 1, so, in response, the archer simply asked, "Why do you ask?" Nathaniel then explained that it was precisely because he didn't know what was happening that, therefore, there's no way he could have done something like that. Sudai examines the ID that is shown to him. Then he reads that it says, level 1, and void attribute. Irritated, he murmurs that this nobody dares to waste his time like that. With that, he turns around and apologizes for having called him. Before leaving, the veteran warns him not to act suspiciously, as having extra work is annoying. Yosuke watches the boy walk away down the hallway. Immediately, he begins to think about that guy, Sudai. With a smile, Yosuke realizes that he can use the veteran to get closer to Ibako without arousing suspicions. Then he wonders if there might be a way to turn him into his pawn, but he quickly gets a new idea. With that, he concludes that this is the perfect time to test out that magic. In another room, Sudai finishes his report on what happened in the D-rank dungeon the previous night. Sitting in his chair, Director Ibako states that ruining things in that manner is not his style. The director then reprimands him, saying that he warned him to be careful about who he chose to use. Sudai bows, offering a sincere apology, and promises to try and defuse the situation immediately. Without being fazed, Ibako simply replies with a naturally. The director then warns him that if he is found to be involved with the rookie house, he will also be subject to criticism. Suddenly, Ibako forcefully grabs his chin and immediately threatens him, telling him not to forget that if something goes wrong, he ended up being betrayed right then and there. Incredulous, the betrayed man asked what he meant by that. The cold-eyed girl said it was because he was even he can be discarded in the blink of an eye. With that, Sudai replies that he understands the director's message, and in his thoughts, he curses the situation, wondering why he has to deal with all this, and regretting that, had he known how things would turn out, he would have extorted much more money from those bastards to silence them, revealing that he is the mastermind behind everything. Back to the current situation, the director says that, having said all that, there's still something he doesn't understand. Not understanding, Sudai asks what that is, director. Then, the director explains that, according to the report, the student in question is at least a third year. However, it shows that there is no record of any third-year student having entered a dungeon the previous night. With that, it leaves the device to he moves on to the other side and begins his conclusion. He concludes that the boys must have been defeated by a monster while hunting rookies and that Sudai is lying to them. Cover up the fact. To him, that's a more realistic conclusion than believing one of his own students defeated the novice hunters alone, without having to. Answer: Sudai just asks if that's really the case. In fact, the director confirms it and concludes, unless something extremely unusual has happened. The word unusual makes Sudai recall Kyosuke's identification with the void attribute. With that, he turns to Ibako and asks if it would be possible that a unique attribute was involved in the case. The director considers the idea and responds that a unique attribute is, in fact, but he retains his special ability to become strong by mastering all the elements. One day, portals leading to dungeons suddenly appeared all over the world. Level 100 monster with time magic, while the blonde commented that they just wanted to make money safely. With that, Ingolf and the Japanese, plausible possibility. A smile forms on Sudai's face, and he immediately offers to resolve the matter personally for the director. With a new plan in mind, he promises to quickly resolve this problem. Inside a dark hallway, torches flicker restlessly. That is approaching. There, a group of students cast coordinated spells against an unknown threat. One of the students then shouts that the monster managed to break through the defense and is heading toward them. With that, the creature advances furiously, forcing everyone to scatter in order to survive. In the middle of the chaos, Sudai conjures magic to contain the attack, while reprimanding the class for breaking battle formation under any circumstance. The creature falls to the ground as he claims to have eliminated all the monsters in the area. Immediately, the other students comment on how amazing he is for having been chosen by Director Ibako. His followers congratulate him with a salutation, praising the good work he accomplished. As soon as he finishes, he announces that he will leave the rest to them and prepares to leave. Alone, he reveals that now is the time to do what he really came to do in that place. Immediately, he takes out an artifact with chains and identifies it only as chains. Then he activates the item and orders it to immediately reveal the location of Asayosuke. Sudai then concludes, as he imagined, that the target is far from the other students. Even without knowing what the other is planning, he considers that they argued that he only wanted to help people, but he ended up putting everyone in a dangerous situation. Nathaniel then affirmed that, despite everything, that current situation is better for him. That way, no one would think that Kyosuke's death was anything more than an unfortunate accident. Then, he will say that he found it by chance, explaining that such occurrences are common within dungeons. He then begins to recount the events. Mentioning the novice hunter incident first, he continues by stating that ever since the boy left the hospital, he has brought nothing but trouble. Plus, he admits that he is genuinely curious about what those guys were saying earlier. In a flashback, Sudai was listening to the story, questioning whether what the students were saying was actually true. The group begs him to believe them, explaining that the one without attributes attacked them, using the exact same magic as them. One of them adds that the unfortunate guy even created an immense flame, the likes of which they had never seen before. Still, he claims that he can't believe a story like that. With that, he stands up and says he's already asked everything he needed to know. As soon as one of the students begins to speak, Sudai harshly interrupts him. Immediately afterward, he orders his men to re-educate them, as he has no use for weaklings who lose against incompetence. As he is dragged away, one of the young men screams desperately, saying that this was not what Sudai had promised. While his men immobilize the other boy, he states that Kyosuke is no longer human. Following the trail of energy, Sudai reflects. That day would be the last time. Saying his goodbyes, he told them that they would not see him again and abandoned him there. Unsatisfied and betrayed, the man shouted that they couldn't be, that the fear he saw in the students was not normal. He remembers that, in order to test him, he made him participate in his clan's special class, but the boy just showed powerful illusions. As he passed by the defeated monsters, he surmised that Asayosuke must have used some kind of magic item or something similar. Sud is certain that he also dealt with the novice hunters using some underhanded method. Upon discovering the corpse of another monster, he wonders if that was also the work of Asayosuke. Seeing that the creature was killed with a single fire attack, he admits that what the boys said wasn't a complete fabrication. Still, Sudai scoffs at the feat, claiming that such power is nothing special. He then muses that even Ibako himself, the pentagram's failure, could accomplish the same. He concedes that for the time being, he has no choice but to obey him, but one day, he will surpass him and take Ibako's place as a pentagram to rule the world. With his grand plan in mind, a sinister smile spreads across his face. To achieve his objective, he knows he can't allow anyone to uncover their connection. As for Yosuke, who will likely cause even more trouble, he will ensure that a minor accident befalls him. The artifact then points toward a corner nearby, indicating that the boy must be right around there. Peeking around the corner, he prepares himself, wondering what Yosuke could possibly be doing in a place like that. In the next instant, his eyes widen in shock at what he sees. On the other side, Yosuke is perched atop a pile of monsters, greeting him and complaining that he's too late and already tired of waiting. Serious, and demanded to be taken out of there. Then, he recalled how, in his position as leader, he desperately tried to protect the world from. Completely taken aback, he wonders how the boy managed to detect his presence, which should be completely hidden. Yosuke then provokes him by asking if that's exactly what he's thinking about right now, calling him by name. Sudai can't believe it and wonders if Kyosuke really read his thoughts. Stepping back, he finally asks, "What the hell is Kyosuke, really?" The boy replies that he heard Ibako chose him, but that he's not as impressive as he imagined. He immediately adds that the way he hunts down rookies to extort money is exactly what that coward Ibako would do. Completely exposed, Sudai demands to know how he has knowledge of that information. Kyosuke then stands up and says that it seems he really enjoys tormenting others. However, he asserts that Sudai has never understood what it means to be married. With that, he raises his fist and declares that he's going to teach him that feeling right now to end this. He reveals that he will use his magic to make the other dance for him. Sud confronts Kyosuke, who stands with his hands in his pockets, and states that he is far too dangerous. And as he activates the flames on his sword, he proclaims that, for the sake of his ambition, he will have to defeat him at any cost. Then he advances, but Kyosuke easily dodges the blow. With a flame in his hand, the challenger provokes him, asking if that is his true strength. He immediately launches the monsters, unable to comprehend the betrayal. His only goal was to protect everyone without exception. With that thought in mind, he struck the barrier and wondered why this was. Wave of fire in the direction of his opponent. Sudai blocks the attack with his sword, questioning whether Kyosuke believes he can defeat him with that level of skill. But it was just a distraction, and undeterred, the boy prepares a new spell with a different attribute. Immediately, the energy magic reaches him, but it's defended by the sword, throwing him back from the impact. With the force of the blow, the aggressor is violently thrown against the hallway wall. Before he can react, he is surprised by magic that emerges from the rubble of the previous attack that was still on the ground. Still, he manages to get out of that one too, cutting the stone stakes into pieces. Sudai then perceives, in disbelief, that Kyosuke can actually use multi-attribute magic. While fighting, he demands to know what the problem is with his void magic, just as the opponent appears nearby. Barely managing to react, he defends himself successfully from the attack on his back. Soon, Sudai shouts that all Kyosuke does is get in the way of his plans. The clash of swords pushes them back, creating some distance for an instant. Kyosuke then questions him disdainfully, asking what plans he is talking about. The other answers that it is so, and declares that one day, he will become someone who will surpass Ibako. He will immediately take his place and will become a pentagram saint. Kyosuke then asks, why specifically Ibako, since there are other pentagram saints, with a happening to him. Right behind him, the dungeon creatures began to close in. With no time to lose, the magician jumped forward and attacked the snake. Smile, Sudai begins to explain the reason for his plans. He says it's because Ibako is a failure who abandoned the pentagram in the past. He explains that, if he manages to become a saint, which will give him the right to rule the world, so it makes sense to target the weakest one of them all. Kyosuke closes his eyes. For a moment, he shows aversion. Sudai calls him despicable before asking what that was all about. The young man then admits that he was worried that the other one could have reached Ibako first. Nonetheless, he finishes by saying that if his ambition was that pathetic, there was no reason to worry. Those words leave Sudai completely without a reaction. With a cry of fury, he orders Kyosuke to shut up and advances for another attack. As their swords cross, He questions what's wrong with wanting power, money, and women. He continues, affirming that he wants the power of trample on others without anyone being able to say anything about it. With the blades locked, he shouts that this is the power he truly desires, and explains that if he manages to become a saint of the pentagram, he will be able to do whatever he wants. Once he obtains that position, he will have the opportunity to discover the saint's weakness and make her his, the saint, and make her his own. Kyosuke interrupts him, saying that his words are not even worthy of being heard, and immediately declares that it is time to end this and launch a decisive attack. Desperate, he shouts that it is impossible, as he sees his sword shatter into pieces. Kyosuke then reveals that a giant advanced against him. Suddenly, he perceived something unexpected. An infinite horde of monsters awaited him. Using his vision of the future, thanks to the useless chatter, he managed to finish preparing his magic. Terrified, the adversary begs him not to come closer, shouting for him to stay away. Stay away. Even so, Yosuke ignores the plea and says that now is the time to watch him dance. He soon casts his magic, absolute hypnosis, on his opponent. Under the effect of the spell, Sudai's eyes lose focus and become completely empty. In an instant, he collapses to the ground, unconscious. Even so, still, Yosuke reflects that this magic requires effort to break the target's spirit, but once activated, the result is guaranteed. He immediately orders the other to get up, as if he were a puppet. The boy begins to rise from the ground under his command. With an empty voice, he responds, "Yes, sir," and confirms that he is already up. Yosuke then smiles, confirming that his spell was a complete success. He then instructs the manipulated to focus on completing the mission for now, as he will give new orders later. While Yosuke tries to respond in a slurred manner, he orders him to use his normal tone of voice again. Immediately, his eyes blink and return to their usual appearance, his personality restored. He turns around and says that he will return to lead the group. As he walks away, Kyosuke watches him silently, making sure the control is active. A satisfied smile forms on the manipulator's face after the success of the plan. As he walks down the hallway, a shadow reveals that someone he thought he could escape. However, the vision of the future shattered, showing only his tragic end in the clutches of the monsters. With a bitter smile, Else has just arrived, revealing himself to be Saikarin. She asks where he has been, explaining that she was worried. With a kind smile, he apologizes and says he was talking to Tsudai about something. Surprised, the girl questions him to find out what they were talking about. Kyosuke responds that they talked solely about how to realize each other's dreams, which leads Karen to ask if he received some good advice. With that, he confirms that he received excellent advice, assuring her that one of his dreams will undoubtedly come true because of it. Encouraged, Karen says that she hopes her dream comes true soon, to which he agrees that he wants that as well. Soon after, a group of students passes through the hallway, announcing that the special class is about to end and that all students must assemble immediately. Karen then calls him to go together, because they can't be left behind. In their thoughts, Yosuke reflects on how truly happy he is to have participated in that class, and silently concludes that he finally managed to get his hands on a pawn that Ibako would never suspect. Still in his office, Director Ibako asks if there has been any progress regarding the incident involving novice hunters. In response, Sudai confirms that, as expected, a student with a unique attribute was involved in the case. Furthermore, he reveals that the student in question is Sai Kyosuke, a first-year student who possesses the attribute of the void. With that, he reports that he is conducting the interrogation. He understood that that future no longer existed. Still, he continued to bravely fight against the advancing creatures without stopping, gathering his in the usual location, and that the young man has already admitted to using multi-attribute magic during the confrontation. Upon hearing this statement, the director asks exactly what this so-called multi-attribute magic entails. However, the interrogator only gives a faint smile before responding, implying active mind control. Still, he concedes that the specifics are still unknown, but assures them that he can uncover everything eventually necessary. Seizing the opportunity, Sudai mentions a long-held suggestion, proposing that perhaps it would be fitting for the director himself to take charge of the interrogation. After some thought, Ibako agrees that the idea isn't bad at all. The man remarks that it's been quite some time since he tortured anyone, and promises a reward for the trouble the student caused. With that, Sudai rises and begins to say that, in that case, they should go together. However, that plan is cut short when the director dismisses him, saying that he will come later, which causes the other person to leave by himself. As soon as he is alone, Ibako answers the phone and introduces himself. On the other end of the line, a female voice greets him and thanks him for choosing them for the negotiation from the previous day. Bluntly, he orders her to quit the performance. He immediately calls her by her name, Lei Roxy, revealing that she didn't fall into the trap. The CEO of the Pentagram Saints then reminds him that they are partners and share government subsidies. Leaning back in his chair, the last strength, and concentrated all his remaining energy into his fist, he immediately launched himself into the middle of the horde, unleashing one last, powerful attack. Director tries to end the conversation by claiming that he is busy, but she simply comments that he is still the same as always. In a way, provocatively, Roxy questions what important business the Academy's great director could possibly have. He immediately warns her to be careful about what she says, and reveals that he is investigating a student who possesses the void attribute. In a mocking tone, the woman questions what a failure with that attribute could amount to. Even so, the director replies that, despite everything, it remains a unique attribute. Therefore, he concludes that anything is possible. Upon hearing this, the businesswoman falls silent for a moment, contemplating the information. She then asks if he's referring to something akin to Kyoichiro's time attribute magic. Irritated, Ibako demands that she not speak of that man, which only provokes her to mock his temper. Nevertheless, she admits that she can't blame him for his reaction. With that, Lasius remembers that the balance of power among the adventurers has completely shifted since the awakening of that power. Then he says goodbye, mentioning that he will get back in touch again later. After ending the call, the director coldly dismisses him coldly. Shortly after, he slams his fist on the table and insults her, calling her a selfish bitch. However, he admits to himself that hearing that cursed name after so long irritated him deeply. He soon decides that this is the perfect moment to unleash all of his pent-up anger. And so, Ibako's silhouette walks towards A. Inside these dungeons, monsters of all kinds began to emerge without stopping. Therefore, the only ones capable of stopping them were those who had. Shortly afterward, he fell to his knees on the ground, completely injured and exhausted. With his body covered in blood, he realized that he had not been able to change the Strox's secluded warehouse and, standing in front of the door, he wonders exactly how he should torture the prisoner. While touching the lock, he begins to list the methods, such as drowning and pulling out nails. With a smile, he decides to unleash all the rage on the student that he couldn't unleash on Kiro. After using his energy on the lock, he confirms that the door has been opened. With open arms, he enters the place and apologizes to Tsudai for the delay. However, upon seeing the torture room empty, he realizes that no one is inside. From behind, the other person prepares to strike him with an object. The attack is aimed towards the director's face. Director. At the last second, Ibako raises his arm and manages to block the blow. He then turns towards the attacker and says that he seems to have been underrated. Staring intently at him, she asks if his arrogance stems from all the praise he has received. With his energy manifesting, he questions whether the boy he thought he could really defeat him and attacks with energy chains, declaring that it wouldn't be enough to win. The chains, they wrap around Tsudai's body, lifting him upside down into the air. Immediately, the director delivers a tremendous kick, sending him crashing forcefully against the ground, declaring that someone like him is no match at all. Walking towards the gagged traitor, he says that he made the wrong decision, then declares that Yoi Chitsudai's foolish desires led him to his own ruin. Suddenly, a voice from behind comments that he's still future. Facing the approaching monsters, he realized there seemed to be no other option. Then, he wondered if he should simply accept his death, being the same idiot as always. Startled by the presence, he turns around and asks, "Who's there?" Yosuke emerges from the entrance, describing someone who bows to the strong and exploits the weak, adding that he seems as greedy and foolish as ever. Furious, Ibako shouts, questioning how he dares to speak to the academy director in that manner. Ignoring the threat, the young man continues his speech, saying that someone ruined himself with foolish desires. To conclude, he states that it sounds like a perfect self-introduction for Ivo Jideki, the director. Without recognizing him, the man demands to know who that bastard is and demands his student number in order to expel him immediately. With a smile, Yosuke simply asks him to calm down, ending by saying that he has finally reached this point, and suggests that they should have a conversation now, just the two of them. Furious, the director accuses him of mocking him while preparing his magic. Small stones levitate from the ground with the intensity of his power. With that, Ibako, he promises to show the vast difference in strength between them. The man then invokes an advanced earth attribute magic, summoning a giant hand from beneath his control. As that structure made of stones and earth advances like a punch, he declares that there's no way a student could dodge the attack. He then shouts for the young man to die as he launches lava into the air. The stone fist advances at great speed towards Kyosuke. Immediately, over there. However, a new resolve took hold of his mind. Vowing not to die like that, he declared that he would reincarnate and become stronger. With that, he promised. Blow impacts. A devastating explosion erupts, scattering fragments. Laughing maniacally, the director declares victory and shouts that this is what happens when a mere student attempts to challenge him. The cloud of dust begins to dissipate from the impact site, revealing the warehouse in ruins. Ibako then wonders if he went a little too far, and concludes that he will have to find a new place to torture people. Still unaware of who it was, he decides he will stay to watch him die. Suddenly, a voice from within the dust comments that he has been a great nuisance. Confused, the director turns toward the source of the sound. In the middle of the dissipating dust cloud, Kyosuke's silhouette appears, completely unharmed. Surprised, Ibako can barely manage to start forming a word. The young man then begins to walk slowly in his direction. In a calm tone, he reminds the man that he had only asked for a small conversation. Headmaster Sock shouts that it's impossible for anyone to escape his advanced magic unscathed, insisting that there's never been a student like that before. Pointing a finger, he demands to know who the hell Kyosuke is, and orders him to state his name. Smiling, Kyosuke simply repeats the question about Sock's own identity. Immediately, he questions whether the other man truly doesn't recognize him. Yako retorts that he doesn't know any bastard like him, and demands that he stop joking around and reveal his name. The boy then feigns being deeply hurt by the harsh words, while the image of the ancient Kyoichido draws an analogy in the director's mind, that he would reach the pinnacle of his strength to exact definitive revenge on everyone. All of that rage and desperation became the fuel for his. Connecting all the dots in the director's thoughts, the young man asks if he has truly forgotten him. Upon recognizing him, the man's expression changes completely, and he stutters, saying that it can't be true. Completely terrified, he backs away while screaming in denial. He puts his hands on his head, certain that this boy is definitely the one he's thinking of. He looks at him in disbelief and calls him a bastard. He immediately orders him to stop this pathetic charade, accusing him of having seen the report about the story. With clenched teeth, he prepares a new energy attack and claims that this man, Misato Kyoichiro, is already dead. With a sigh, Kyosuke states that he has always been like this. The young man continues, saying that the other only believes what is convenient to him and ignores what is not. Irritated, Ibako orders him to stop talking nonsense and threatens to attack him if he gets any closer. With a slight smile, he comments that he understands the situation. As energy gathers in his hand, he says that the director was swayed by the flattering words of the people around him. Finally, he questions if that was the reason for the betrayal against him. Completely losing himself, the man shouts at the boy to shut up and unleashes the energy blast. However, the opponent uses the magic he had been charging to defend himself from the attack. Utterly stunned, Ibu recognizes that magic. It's the same magic Kiro used in the past. With that, the force of the impact explodes and is violently deflected. As he stumbles, determination. Then, he swore that he would endure until the appointed day, the day when he could avenge his regrets and settle accounts with. Backwards, he declares that there's no way that's possible. He immediately recalls that he was certain Kiro had been sealed in the dungeon. In response, Yosuke approaches, saying he truly was imprisoned, and continues to reveal that he too was cast into the depths of despair. Unable to believe it, the director asks if he is really Misato Kyoichiro. Kyosuke responds almost inaudibly that it took him quite a while to realize it himself. Smiling, he says it has been a long time and that he is happy to be remembered. Still on his knees, Director Ibako asks once more if that young man is really Kyosuke, but then he abruptly stands up. He shouts, telling them not to take him for a fool, because that would imply he died and returned to this world. Immediately, he gathers energy in his hand, preparing for a new attack. Then, he declares that the ghosts should remain still. Soon after, a powerful burst of energy is thrown towards the boy. However, Yosuke manages to dodge the blow with a jump at the last moment. The energy brushes past him as it deflects in the air. With that, he manages to land safely. However, a giant stone fist emerges from the sky just above him, advancing in his direction, but he manages to avoid it again. Seeing the scene, the director calls him an insolent brat. Still, He thinks that he needs to gain the advantage in the fight. He remembers that he may have been a non-combatant in his days as Golden CK, something the other saints still make fun of him for, those who betrayed him. Thus, his body was consumed by an intense light as the monsters surrounded him. In the midst of the explosion of energy he unleashed, however, he clenches his fist and prepares himself. As rocks levitate around him, he shouts that it doesn't mean he is weak. The man then reveals that it is the secret technique that took him 20 years to create, a technique with which he unleashes his powerful dual wind and earth magic. He immediately shouts at the young man to receive his attack. A storm of rocks and wind advances at great speed. Soon, multiple stone projectiles impact the area all around him, and the attack finally explodes in a devastating impact. Gasping, he asks what he thought of that, claiming that it is his strongest magic. The director then observes the cloud of dust that rose in the area. After a moment, he notices that Kyosuke isn't fighting back, so he lets out a laugh, barely audible to himself. He immediately celebrates by shouting that he finally achieved it and boasts, claiming that he defeated the damned Misato Kiro. In a mocking tone, he says, "The time attribute is now a thing of the past." To top it off, he asks how many years have passed since then, answering that it has been 20 damn years. He declares that the person the young man once knew is no longer who he is now, as he recalls his shameful past. Hiding his face with laughter, he shouts that the boy shouldn't have underestimated him. He then explains that, because 20 years have passed, his level has increased, and it's only natural that he has become stronger. Then he breathes a sigh of relief. He thinks that he has finally defeated him, and that he will no longer allow others to act superior to him. With a shout, one last cry of agony echoed. When the light dissipated, he opened his eyes to find himself in a new place. Barely awake, he sat up on the edge of a bed, and immediately got to his feet. Declares that he is truly the strongest among the pentagram saints. Suddenly, a voice from within the dust cloud interrupts him, asking if he's all ready. It's over. So, when the cloud dissipates, he appears completely unharmed, causing the other to stutter in shock. Pointing this out, the director questions how he could have possibly survived so many attacks. The young man simply comments that he became capable of using powerful magic, as one would expect from a hero of this era. Soon, an aura begins to form around his body. With a smile, he says that now he can finally release his anger without needing to restrain himself. Completely terrified, Ibako realizes that this man is a monster. Desperate, Ibako shouts that he won't let him hinder him again, after having worked so hard to get this far. Immediately, the director launches his attack once again, summoning the giant stone hand, the fist of rock. He advances to crush Kyosuke, and when the blow connects, he believes he has finally caught him. But from within the rubble, the calm voice of the young man can be heard. Immediately, a torrent of water erupts from inside the structure, as he remarks that the other is as noisy as ever. The liquid magic completely dissolves the earth attack, transforming it into mud. Standing atop the rubble, the young man questions whether he really believes that's enough to defeat him. Terrified, the man stammers, begging him not to come closer. Then, he releases another burst of energy, and looked at himself in the mirror, noticing his new appearance. He soon confirmed with a smile that the reincarnation had indeed worked. Observing the hospital room filled with unfamiliar machines, desperately, screaming for him to stay away. However, Yosuke deflects the attack with a simple wave of his hand. The energy is redirected into a vortex. With that, Ibako himself is struck head-on by the counterattack. Kyosuke approaches the fallen enemy in front of him, with his fist engulfed in flames as he watches him, exhausted and completely defeated. The director begs for forgiveness, prostrate on the floor, and apologizes for what happened 20 years ago. He continues to plead, but the young man remains silent. Despite his desperation, the man thinks that the other was always foolish and kind, believing that he would certainly forgive him if he begged. However, Yosuke orders him to shut up, stating that this was exactly how he was, cheated in the past. He immediately questions whether Ibako really believes he would let that happen a second time. Desperate, Ibako tries to appeal to past, recalling that they used to be friends. The young man retorts, saying that the other has no right to say such things, not after having transformed into a demon of revenge. Without hesitation, he lands a flaming punch squarely on the fallen man's face. Immediately following, he unleashes a brutal sequence of blows imbued with both fire and ice magic. With the impact, the director is hurled backwards, gravely injured, as he loses awareness. He can only think that he never should have messed with that man before being completely consumed by an explosion from the final blow. That hospital with unknown machines, He wondered just how many years had passed. He then feared that if 100 years had gone by, he wouldn't be able to exact revenge on his former. Throws him against a tree. Standing before the frozen body, Yuke tells him he should be grateful to still be alive, as there is something he still needs to ask. Looking at the unconscious enemy, asks if he can still hear him. Still dazed on the ground, Ibuko wakes up, confused about his location. Soon after, Yosuke greets him, saying that he has finally woken up. Immediately, the director crawls backward in a panic. Then, he begs them not to kill him. The young man then reassures him, stating that he has no intention of killing him. However, he pauses before continuing to speak. With that, he pressures him, saying that he will have to answer some questions. Thus, he prepares to ask his first question. Showing the cell phone that he found, he demands that he talk about a woman named Roxy. The man tries to recover the device, shouting that the device belongs to him. Kyosuke ignores him and points out that, according to the phone's history, the woman contacted him that same day and immediately interrogated him, pressing him intensely about the conversation's details. Cornered, the director reveals that she will be coming to Japan in 3 days, and that they had discussed it. The young man smiles upon hearing this, saying that he understands. With that, he recalls the past, and is left with an unresolved thought about what he will do with her within that time frame. He then declares that he has already decided on his next course of action. Upon returning the cell phone, he instructs the other person to treat Lady Roxy normally for the time being. However, he forbids him from disclosing anything about his identity. Immediately, companions, turning around, something on top of a piece of furniture caught his attention. It was the student ID of the body's owner, reveals that he cast a spell on the director's heart while he was unconscious. Therefore, if he dares to tell the truth, a burst of energy will hit him directly. The man reacts in fear to the display of power as he walks away, reminding him to keep his promise. In fact, he reveals that he didn't use any magic of that kind, but considering Ibako's cowardly personality, that simple bluff would be more than enough. He then decides he will not use absolute hypnosis, because he wants his enemy to suffer desperately while maintaining his own consciousness. 3 days later, the scene changes to the interior of an airplane. Inside, Layrock calmly looks out the window. Soon, one of his subordinates informs him that they are about to arrive. Suddenly, the flight attendant begins to announce that the plane is about to land. Her announcement is interrupted by a scream that echoes through the cabin. Soon, a masked man appears, announcing that the plane is being hijacked, and immediately orders all passengers to lie down on the floor. Immediately, Lei stands up to confront the invaders. The terrorist threatens her, warning her not to disobey his orders. However, he is surprised by the speed with which she appears right in front of him. With that, she strikes him, combining her attack with a power blast. The target barely manages to react to the surprise attack. Quickly, the woman neutralizes the 2 hijackers using her powers, as the other passengers observe the scene. Awakened magical abilities. Among these heroes were a knight named Engv Bonds and the mage Claudia Borg of the Golden Seekers Guild. Alongside them, 20 years had passed. Suddenly, a detail on the card left him completely surprised. The identification revealed that the boy's name was Saiki Yosuke, and his attribute was completely impressed. One of them then recognizes her as a member of the Pentagram Sands, exclaiming that they have all been saved by her. Following this, landing, Lei and her team disembark on the airport runway while the bandits are being detained. An airline representative approaches and thanks Miss Lei profusely. With a smile, she responds that she is happy to have been on the plane, as it prevented the company's reputation from being tarnished. With that, one of her men points out that the kidnapper's weapon was special, since it was not detected by the detector. Lei comments that recently many groups have been using equipment made from dungeon materials, which is why she says she had to give her team special equipment, especially so that they could defend themselves. She then suggests that the airline acquire defense equipment similar to what her team carries. The representative immediately agrees and bows, promising to manage everything. As he walks away, the woman makes a call and orders them to release the kidnappers. Her subordinate comments that the plan went smoothly, and she replies that it was quite amusing. After all, planting, those kidnappers helped close the deal she wanted. The man then points to the crowd, remarking that it was also great publicity. Soon, the crowd chants Lady Roxy's name, hailing her as a great heroine. With a smile, she simply waves to her new admirers. A short time, empty. With that, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. He immediately burst out laughing, unable to contain himself. He remembered that, in his past life, Later, they arrive by car at a large school building. As she gets out, Lei announces that it's time to take care of the business that brought her to Japan. The scene cuts to the director's office, where Ibako waits with an injured face. He silently gazes out the window of his office. The visitor enters the room. With a smile, she apologizes for intruding. She quickly questions him about whether there has been any progress in the investigation of the student with the attribute of emptiness. The man lies, saying it was just a false alarm, and claims the boy was nothing more than a useless failure. She appears to agree, commenting that even a unique attribute isn't anything special, after all. Aware that the spell will activate if he says something inappropriate, he knows he only needs to respond normally. With that, his colleague says she will get straight to the matter she really wanted to discuss. Lei mentions the new drug that they are developing it, and suggests they choose the next test subject. He then comments that the director made good use of the academy's system. From afar, Kyosuke overhears the conversation, including the suggestion that they start with the student list. Hearing this, he reacts with contempt, stating that their attitude is despicable. With that, he declares that the next person to experience despair will be Lei Roxy. Thus, the news on television reports that Lei Roxy of the Pentagram SS arrived in Japan yesterday. Furthermore, the reporter continues, saying that she is being praised for controlling. Despite being feared for his time attribute, he realized that he had reached the limit of his strength. Not even his clairvoyance was able to see the kidnappers. At that moment, Yosuke recognizes her as one of the people who betrayed him 20 years ago. Soon, he remembers that she produces weapons. Unique items made with Donjion's materials allowed her to amass a fortune. However, based on his conversation with Ibako, the young man concludes that she is using the school for illicit activities. With that, he gets ready to leave the house. Smiling, he reflects on how she exploits others while hiding behind a heroine facade. Resolved, he declares to himself that he cannot allow the situation to continue as it is. As he walks down the hallway, he considers the best way to proceed. Seeing the news on his cell phone, he remembers that security at the academy was already strict when he first arrived. Suddenly, Karen calls out his name, interrupting his plan to investigate the situation. With a smile, the girl greets him and wishes him a good morning. As she approaches, he notices the article about law, and he confirms that he was just taking a look around. Soon, Karen excitedly comments that the woman is incredible for having faced all of those enemies. He then mentions that the Changan Great Serpent is also very popular, leading Kyosuke to wonder what Changan could be. With that, she explains that Changan is the clan that Lei created, and that it is made up of many powerful members. At that instant, the young man, he deduces that the men in black suits guarding Lei were probably from that clan. As they walk, Karen asks about his future plans, since true depth of the void attribute's power. With that in mind, he said he felt very sorry for that boy. Only he knew that the empty attribute was that many students are planning to join the military. However, he interrupts his own response as he suddenly gets an idea. He immediately realizes, if he manages to use that clan to his advantage, perhaps he can get closer to Lei. Determined, he changes his mind about what he was going to do. With a smile, he thanks his friend, saying that, thanks to her, he has finally figured out what to do. He immediately runs down the hallway, leaving the girl behind, who doesn't understand his reaction. To him, Karen only responds, confused, "You're welcome." Back in his office, Ibako's phone suddenly rings, startling him. With suspicion, the director, he answers the call and identifies himself. On the other end of the line, Yosuke greets him and tells him that he needs a favor. As soon as the man asks what he wants, the young man begins to give an order about what to do if Lei contacts him. Finally, the scene changes to a laboratory where several researchers are gathered around a bound man. In the center of the room, the subject groans in pain as three assistants analyze him. Finally, a shadow of a person approaches the fallen man on the laboratory floor. Soon, Lei Roxy appears and asks how the guinea pig is feeling. The man begs her to stop injecting him with the medicine, shouting that he will die if this continues. Without a word, the woman kicks him forcefully in the face, forcing him against the ground. With that, she states that she doesn't listen to the opinions of lab rats. She advises him not to be so pessimistic about the situation. Then, she, the strongest, a power that no one possessed in his previous life. Since it was such a rare attribute, no one knew how to train it, and for that reason, the boy explains that, if he is compatible with the medicine, he will become even stronger. With a gesture, she gives the order for the procedure to continue. The man enters. Panicking, he begs them to wait. Seeing the syringe approach, One of the assistants prepares the injection to administer it. The guinea pig struggles as the needle pierces his body. He immediately screams in pain due to the substance's effects. An investigator holds him firmly to the ground as the observer monitors the result from afar. After the seizure, the subject passes out and begins to drool on the floor. She then mocks, saying that the experiment resulted in a loss of speech and that the drug doesn't work without some magical ability. While they are calling for the elevator, one of the subordinates claims that they still need more data. He also comments that they will need more guinea pigs soon, and the woman agrees with him. Affirmation. With that, he decides that, to disguise the experiment, they will make it appear to be a recruitment drive for the Great Serpent of Changsan. He immediately calls Ibako and he returns to the subject of the guinea pigs they had discussed earlier. Inside the elevator, he specifies that he needs people skilled in magic and asks him to select some students from the academy. On the other end of the line, the director listens to the proposal in silence. In response to the request, Ibako suggests that they could approach it in a different way. He proposes holding a selection within the academy itself to find the most skilled students. Surprised, still remained at level 1. With that, he figured that the boy was ridiculed many times for having a power that was considered as if it wasn't an attribute at all. By the idea, the woman congratulates him ironically, saying that he occasionally has good ideas. As she exits the elevator, she ends the call, informing, "I will send the event details soon." As soon as the call ends, the director slams the phone hard onto his desk. With that, he reveals that he did exactly as Kyosuke had asked him to do. Shortly after, a man walks onto the auditorium stage and announces that he has a message for the students. He reveals that the clan, the Great Serpent of Chan, has decided to hold a selection exam to find new recruits. Immediately, the students react with enthusiasm, realizing that this is their chance to enter the popular clan. In the middle of the crowd, Yosuke listens to the recruitment announcement in silence. With this, he realizes that the path to getting closer to Lei has finally opened up. In the field of, at the academy, the examiner thanks the students for participating in the Changsan Great Serpent selection exam. Then, the man announces that he will explain how the exam will work. Knowing that he needs to pass this exam to join the clan and get closer to Lei, Yosuke remains attentive. The young man reflects that, in contrast to his approach with Ibako, this time his strategy will be the opposite in order to attract the attention of Jinu, the right-hand man of Lei, and the other examiners. He decides he will display his full power without holding anything back. Suddenly, a voice calls out his name, pulling him from his. He immediately promised the boy that he would be calm, assuring him that he would make his name known throughout the world as the strongest adventurer. Thoughts. Karen approaches and asks if he is also going to take the exam. The boy confirms, even though he didn't want her to get involved, but he doesn't try to stop her. Participate. With that, the girl admits that she knows she doesn't belong in that place. However, she states that she has her own reasons for wanting to enter the clan. Encouraged, she proposes that they both do their best on the test together, and he agrees. With that, he reaffirms to himself that he needs to pass no matter what. Soon, an instructor announces that the test to measure each person's magical power will begin. He presents a device that will visualize the power, magic of whoever touches it. With that, he informs them that they will measure everyone's magic power there, and asks them to approach one by one. The first student touches the device to release their energy. The examiner writes down the result on the chart without showing any reaction. Then, the instructor announces that the next participant is Asayosuke. Upon introducing himself, the young man informs the man that he is under his care. The student's ID shows that his name is Asayosuke, and his attribute is Void. Reading that he is level 30, the evaluator concludes that he shouldn't expect much from the boy. With that, Asayosuke approaches and places his hand on the measuring device. In the next instant, a wave of energy emanates from the device, revealing immense power like a cosmic explosion of bright sparks. The instructor can barely react, shielding his face from the light. While the others retreat, Karen, thanks to his ancient clairvoyance ability, he knew exactly how to train the Void attribute. With this newfound power, he declared that he would become exclaims that this is insane. The examiner remains stunned, unable to move in the face of the scene. Asayosuke then asks if that was sufficient, and the man nods at the astonished person. Without hesitation, the evaluator writes an S-rank evaluation next to Asayosuke's name. Soon, the magical abilities test. It begins with a new demonstration. The examiner questions whether the boy can only generate a lot of earth, because simply having a lot of magical power is enough. With a smile, Yosuke prepares to show what he is capable of. He then manipulates several elements at the same time for the test. The instructor observes the scene, unable to believe what he is seeing. The young man demonstrates his mastery over all the basic attributes simultaneously. One of the superiors asks incredulously if he is really using all the basic attributes at once. With that, the boy demonstrates the power of a void attribute, something they despise her. Karen congratulates him, exclaiming that it was amazing. He thanks her and encourages her to do her best on her test as well. Soon, it's the girl's turn, and she positions herself for her demonstration. She concentrates and releases her magical power. Her energy causes the dead flowers in the pots to begin to revive. In the end, a garden of flowers blooms before everyone's eyes. Some students mock her ability, asking if reviving flowers is all she can do. Kyosuke, however, recognizes that this is light attribute magic, a rather rare power. The young man concludes that, although rare, her strongest of all. Furthermore, he swore that he would make those traitors regret betraying him and causing his death in order to take his revenge on. Skill will be difficult to assess, but it's best for her not to get too involved. Then, Karen silently walks away as one of the examiners observe her. Soon, the man jots down on a card that Saikurin is worthy of being tested as a guinea pig. Finally, the examiner announces that they will be holding individual duels. Then, he introduces the group of fighters who will be the students' opponents. To the surprise of the students, the evaluator explains that the evaluation will not be based on victory or defeat, but rather on how they fight. However, he believes that in any case, there is no way a student can beat one of them. With a laugh, one of the opponents approaches and asks if Kyosuke is the student who caused the tumult during the exam. He continues, saying that even though the boy achieved good results, he will prove that it doesn't matter in an actual fight. With a smiling, Yosuke replies yes, adding that he hopes to learn a great deal from him. With that, the opponent declares that he will end the fight with a single blow. Then, he concentrates his energy and launches a ground-based attack. The sphere of rock rapidly advances toward his opponent, breaking into several pieces. However, the young man easily stops the attack and even sends it back at the enemy. The fighter can't believe it, wondering how his magic was destroyed with a single blow. He then realizes that his opponent has simply disappeared from right in front of him. The next instant, Yosuke appears from behind him, immobilizing him with an enchi. Understanding that he first needs to level up. With that in mind, he lies back down on the bed to begin the void attribute, as its ice dagger ready to strike his neck. Ironically, the young man questions whether creating an opening with magic is what he calls real combat, and then states that he learned a lot, unable to hide his surprise. The examiner announces Ikosuke as the victor of the duel. The other students watch in disbelief, unable to believe that he defeated a member of the Great Serpent of Changsan. With that, Ju wonders exactly who that student is. Later, the man informs the leader that the exam has concluded. She asks if he found any interesting guinea pigs, and he confirms that there is a student of interest. Law repeats the question, and his subordinate explains that the student passed the exam with an overwhelmingly strong performance. However, the man reveals that the student seems to possess the void attribute. She then wonders if that could be the student Ibako was investigating. Upon hearing the news, she begins to laugh. Discreetly to herself, she says with a wicked smile that it looks like she's about to get her hands on a very interesting guinea pig. Lei's subordinate then approaches to the stage and announces that he will reveal the names of those who passed the selection exam. With that, he prepares to read the first name on the list. First name announced as passing is Asai Yosuke. One of the students comments disdainfully that it was obvious he would pass, since the exam was ridiculous. Yosuke then concludes that everything happened according to plan, and now he will be able to get closer to Lei. Then, the examiner announces the name of the next person to pass. Nathaniel Cabell, Ibako Jidqui, and Lei Roxy also fought. In the midst of the chaos, a person who had fallen to the ground desperately screamed for help. Name suggests, is related to the magic of controlling nothingness. Its essence lies in the ability to freely project imagination into Saikurin. The girl responds affirmatively, while the boy wonders why she was also selected. He didn't imagine that possessing a unique attribute, that would be enough to pass the test. The young man deduces that the leader is using the students as part of some conspiracy, and there must be a reason for it. For Corinne's selection, unknowingly, she celebrates her approval with a radiant smile. He watches her with a slight smile on his face, of all. Anyway, he decides that he won't let them lay a finger on her. He only needs to achieve his goal while protecting her. A few days later, the scene changes to the Japanese branch of the Lei Company. There, Lei Roxy welcomes everyone who passed the exam. Jay Shinu explains that today they will conduct a fitness check before officially integrating them into the Great Serpent of Changsan. Furthermore, he reveals that the boss herself will be in attendance. Briefly, with that, the man informs them that she will meet with them after verification and guides them around the place. The new recruits observe the imposing architecture of the building as they follow him. Yosuke would like to go to her immediately, but he knows that he can't leave Karen alone at this moment. With that, the girl comments that being in such a large building makes her nervous, and the young man agrees with her. However, she expresses her happiness at finally being able to join the Great Serpent of Changsan. He then asks her why she desires to enter the clan so much. Thus, she reveals that her mother is in the hospital. The reality of it all. After all, even if everyone is capable of imagining things, transforming those things into reality is the difficult part. Luckily, he notices that his body and that the medical expenses are very high. Upon hearing the explanation, he simply responds that he understands the situation. Yosuke perceives that her motive is not, it wasn't him, but his mother, and he decides that he needs to protect her even more than before. The guide then interrupts them, announcing that they have arrived at their destination in the building's basement. Upon entering, they find themselves in a massive underground testing facility. He immediately deduces that this must be the testing facility he suspected. Shortly after, Jang Sinu gives the order to close the door. As soon as the door slams shut, the recruits react in surprise at what has happened. Yosuke realizes that they have no intention of letting anyone escape and that the situation is serious. With that, one of the students confronts the guide, demanding to know what this all means. Immediately, Jang Sinu orders him to be quiet with a threatening tone. The others, the recruits, step back, intimidated by the man's reaction. Calmly, the guide explains that, as he stated before, they will now be undergoing the aptitude verification. He then reveals that the test will be to verify compatibility with a new drug that they are secretly developing. Jay Shinu explains that the substance, made with ingredients from dungeons, can dramatically improve physical abilities and magical power. One of the students asks if that wouldn't be a good thing, while the others look confused. With that, Yosuke steps forward and asks if the new drug has any side effects. The man is quite injured, presenting the perfect opportunity to apply the healing image he has in mind. Concentrating, he begins to visualize responds with a smile, saying it would be quicker to just show them. On the monitor, a recording of a test subject begs them to wait, but their voice is cut down. The new recruits watch in horror as the man drools on the floor. Responding to the screams, the guide explains what they have just witnessed was a person whose body was incompatible with the drug, and asks if that answers their questions. One of the recruits shouts indignantly that they will never agree to take anything like that, of that kind. In response, two of the students launch their own fire and water attacks, and with that, they demand to be let out of there immediately. Soon, Yosuke warns Karen not to stray too far from him. Unfazed, Jang Shinu prepares her counterattack and unleashes a series of blows that strike the classed two students. With the force of the impact, both are completely defeated. Looking at the fallen bodies, the man laments that the number of samples has diminished. With a calm look, he suggests that they begin with the woman who is nearby. Then, he remembers that she is the student with the light attribute, saying that he is anxious to see the results of the experiment. With the syringe in his hand, he begins to walk towards Corinne. However, Yosuke places himself in front of the girl, blocking his path. When asked what he is doing, the young man responds that he is keeping guys like him away from her. With that, one of the other recruits orders his men to restrain him. Immediately, one of the thugs steps forward to attack him, but Yosuke knocks him down. Process. With this, he imagines every cell in his body being restored by magic. Little by little, the energy begins to heal the wounds on his arm. With a single, energy-charged blow, the leader of the thugs reacts in surprise, not understanding what just happened. With his eyes shining and sparks of his power emanate from him as he prepares to attack the remaining men. In the blink of an eye, the young man advances, taking them all down with a single move. With that, Jinjo can hardly believe it, and asks how he defeated so many people with just one blow. Soon, Yosuke confronts him, warning him that he's next. Feeling pressured, Yang is clearly intimidated by the student's power and becomes desperate. The man, he realizes that, since things have reached this point, his only way out is to try and capture the woman, causing Karen to scream in terror as he advances. Yosuke grabs her hand and warns him, reminding him that he already told him not to approach her. Jang pulls his arm back and steps away, indignant, with the boy. A typical student shouldn't be capable of that. Then Yosuke, with a hateful expression, tells him to prepare himself. With that, Yang curses the situation unfolding before her. Then, Yosuke instructs him to stay behind, while thanking him for his protection. As she watches him, she reflects on how incredible he looks at that moment. Then she realizes that she couldn't even follow any of the movements he had executed earlier. Yang admits that she knew that the boy had become stronger, but she didn't imagine he'd improved to this extent. Still, she warns him not to become too overconfident in his smile. He confirms that the technique worked. However, he observes that, since it is a rudimentary spell, the recovery speed is not his own strength. Yosuke interrupts him, saying that he needs to ask him a question. He then states that the academy students are being used as guinea pigs. He then demands to know the exact reason behind all of this. The man simply looks at him with a sly smile. He pauses for a moment before replying that it's very simple. Those who follow Miss Lei can receive her blessings. He then explains that once the drug's development is complete, she will obtain even greater power. Kyosuke confronts him, questioning whether he believes performing inhumane experiments. Inhumane is acceptable for that reason. Finally, Yang states that they are only using what is available, and that there is nothing more to say. Furthermore, he declares that he considers it an honor for the students to serve as their guinea pigs. A memory of Asai surfaces in Kyosuke's mind, recalling his mother's words, which, he's in the hospital, and the medical expenses are high. She also said that being able to join the Great Serpent of Changsan made her very happy. Back in the present, he clenches his fists as he remembers, filling himself with hatred. Yang then points at the girl to begin a speech, but Kyosuke, he interrupts him, shouting at him to shut up. At that moment, his aura begins to shine, just like during the evaluation, forcing the other man to cover his eyes. Kyosuke then asks him who he thinks he is, calling him trash, who tramples on others without understanding Asai's feelings. As she watches him, the girl simply, good, and his internal organs are not healed. He knows that by using the skill multiple times, his level will increase, and his ability to convert calls out his name softly. Yang wonders what incredible pressure that is, and if he really is just a student. Shortly after, he flashes a smile. The man comments that he would normally tell him to know his place, but he doesn't dislike the bravery he's shown, and invites him to serve under Miss Lei's command. He adds that if he were to hand over the girl, he could even become an executive, as Miss Lei would be very pleased. Yosuke repeats his demand to shut his mouth, stating that he will never forgive people like him. As he adjusts his tie, Jay warns him that he will regret this. Afterward, an aura of energy explodes from his body, kicking up shards from the ground around him. His eyes glow a bright, intense yellow with the power released. Observing the scene, Yosuke identifies the technique as body-strengthening magic. Jay confirms this, explaining that combined with his skills, martial arts is his undefeated skill. As he advances, he challenges him to a match. Yang launches into the attack, screaming. Yosuke deviates at the last moment, and his fist destroys the ground where it was. Asai is surprised by the power demonstrated in that attack. The man turns around and comments that it seems the other one managed to dodge. Yosuke notes that the strengthening magic is, in fact, powerful, and decides what to do next. While advancing once more, Jay shouts for him not to dodge the next blow. Still, the young man concentrates to transform his energy into an image. Seeing him standing there, the imagination will actually improve as well. In that way, the scope of images that he can transform into reality will expand more and more. Consequently, opponent shouts, asking, "What the hell is he doing? Has he already given up?" He advances with a final fist, screaming for Yosuke to die. At the last second, void magic activates, stopping the attack with just one hand. Yang stares at him in disbelief, muttering that it's impossible. He wonders if it's the same power as his, but realizes it's actually even stronger than his own. Yosuke then says it seems he can now use body-strengthening magic, and expresses his gratitude. He then explains that he was able to imagine that technique thanks to Yang himself. A little later, a powerful fist hits the man directly in the stomach. The force of the blow sends him flying violently backwards, crashing across the room, and slamming into the wall. Fallen on the ground, he can't believe what just happened. As the other man approaches, Yang wonders who he really is. The young man simply observes him silently for a moment. He then turns to Asai and asks if she is all right, and the girl thanks him. Then, he declares that he will open a path so that everyone can escape from there. One of the students asks him what he plans to do and where he intends to go. Yosuke opens a path in the wall with a pressed, single strike, replying that he has something he needs to take care of. Elsewhere in the building, Lei Rocky is informed via telephone that Mr. J has been defeated and that the students have escaped. Suddenly, she hears a noise and asks, "What was that?" The person on the other end attempts to warn her that an incredibly strong man, it will become possible to create and use many different types of magic, until he reaches the point where the image in his mind can be realized exactly as he envisions it, is coming up. But the call is cut short. Not understanding, the woman wonders what the hell just happened. Just then, Yosuke appears in the doorway of her office and greets her. She immediately confronts him, demanding to know who he is and why he has come. He replies that it is for a simple reason. Finally, Yosuke reveals that he came to avenge what she did 20 years ago. As he watches Lei Roxy approach, she asks what he's talking about when he mentions a debt from 20 years ago. Then he says she seems confused and offers to explain everything in detail. At that moment, the young man begins to recount that after clearing the SSS rank dungeon, the Pentagram SS were hailed as heroes. Immediately afterwards, he states that the conspiracy of that day, a certain man, she interrupts him, asking what a student like him is talking about, and if he's trying to give her a history lesson. Still, the young man continues, saying that the Pentagram Sands are now leaders in every field and are celebrated as heroes who triumphed over evil. The woman then attempts to question exactly what he is implying. However, he cuts her off, asserting that even so, that is far from the truth. Surprised, she asks him to repeat what he said, noticing that the young man's aura has suddenly changed. Without hesitation, she accuses him of using his own companions as sacrifices to reap rewards and build his legacy. Then he declares that even now he tramples on the will of those who were once at his beck and call. In reality, a slight smile appears on his face as he prepares himself. Suddenly, a doctor rushes into the room and exclaims that he moves to the side and asks if that's wrong. She responds with a mocking laugh. Lei Roxy comments that she wondered what he was talking about and questions whether he believes in those things. Conspiracy theories. He responds that it's not just a conspiracy, but that he knows exactly what she did. Finally, the young man declares that he pushed his own companions inside the door. The sudden accusation leaves her paralyzed for a moment. Then she wonders how just any student would know about that. The young man then questions if she still hasn't understood who he really is. Next, he reveals his true identity as Misato Kyoido. The revelation leaves her completely speechless. She yells that it's impossible, but he confirms that it did in fact happen with a firm tone. Remember, he used the same power that made her call him a monster, a magic that only someone of level 100 could use. Staggering backward, she asks if he is really there. Despite her doubt, he claims to know what the King Company has been secretly doing. The young man warns her that if everything comes to light, her reputation will be ruined, causing her to scream at him not to mess with her. He then throws the threat back at her, saying that should be her line. With that, he declares that, because of what happened 20 years ago, and for crushing the hopes of a girl who gave her all, he concludes by saying that he will never forgive her. In response, Lei Roxy only lets out a murmur. She warns him not to underestimate her, reminding him that she is no longer woken up. Immediately, the doctor warns him that he should not move yet, explaining that he had been seriously injured following a monster attack in Misato's body. As she grabs her weapon, a spear from the wall behind her, the woman warns him that since he dared to appear before her, immediately afterwards, he unleashes a wave of energy, shouting that he will make him regret this. With that, the attack surges forward, obliterating everything in its path, leaving a trail of energy. A trail of destruction is left on the office floor. Despite the devastation, the young man remains standing, completely unharmed. With a laugh, she asks him what he thinks of it, and reveals that this is the power of the weapon developed by the King Company. She then explains that the weapon is forged from dungeon materials that are far more durable than any metal. As he leaps into the attack, he shouts that he will show her just how sharp the weapon truly is. He soon unleashes a sequence of rapid blows, but Kyosuke manages to dodge every single one. With a murmur, the woman comments that it seems dodging is the only thing he's good at. Suddenly, Douda, realizing something is wrong, wonders why her attacks aren't hitting him. After observing his movements, the young man simply states that he understands now. He then claims that she has been too preoccupied as a corporate queen, and as a result, her movements have become sloppy. With a smile, he declares that she is no better than Ibako now, leaving her stunned. Furious, Lair Roxy yells at him to stop talking nonsense and prepares another attack. With that, he continues his assault and appears to have completely caught up to her. She thinks that she finally managed to land a hit. Suddenly, Yosuke says it's a pity. He requested they expedite the rescue efforts. The young woman lamented the excessively high number of casualties. Directly ahead, a monster was preparing to. Lying there, he finally understands that this is what happened to the boy's body. The doctor remarks that, because he woke up under such circumstances, it was, as he transfigures behind her with a wave of energy. Regaining her composure, the woman insults him, not understanding what just happened. Lair Roxy. He asks if that was void magic, as he'd never heard of it having such an effect. He then reasons that, if that's the case, he needs more power, and infuses his weapon with fire energy. With that, he decides he will finish him off with his next strike. As he prepares, he shouts that he'll make sure to silence him. Then he advances with his fiery attack, yelling for him to receive it. However, the young man stops the flaming blade with only 2 fingers, unable to believe what he is seeing. She just murmurs that it can't be. Yosuke then says he supposes that's all his powers amount to. Then he thinks that she is even weaker than she was 20 years ago, and that, if that's the case, he has no choice but to use that. Stepping back, Lee Roxy questions him, asking what it is. Suddenly, he pulls out a syringe containing a red liquid. With a swift motion, he injects the substance directly into her neck. Instantly, a dark energy erupts from her body and fills the hall. Observing the scene, he simply comments that she is truly willing to go to such lengths. With that, the woman's body begins to transform amidst an aura. Finally, now fully transformed, she confronts him and asks if he is the monster. In her new form, Lei Roxy laughs and declares that he can't defeat her now. At that moment, Yosuke questions whether she's trying to beat him by using an enhancement drug, and as if the saint had granted him a miracle. Soon after, Yosuke asks what the doctor means by saint. The doctor then questions if she really thinks it's that easy. She warns him not to underestimate her, asking if he has any idea how much time and money was invested in it. Drug. He then elaborates that he gathered rare materials from the depths of the dungeons and spent years refining that serum. Furthermore, he continues by saying that, ever since he witnessed that inhuman power 20 years ago, he has been searching for a way to achieve that level of mastery. With a smile, he declares that he has finally found it. A power that surpasses everything, and that Kyosuke should be thanking her for it. The young man simply responds that it is pathetic, leaving her surprised. Shortly after, questions him if he really thinks he has surpassed everything, while bragging about something he achieved by using a drug. Furious at the comment, the woman demands to know what he just said. He then apologizes for interrupting her little monologue as he shifts his combat stance. Next, he affirms that it is time to put an end to this, as fiery energy emanates from his fists. She nods, and says that they will make it clear once and for all who is the strongest between them. Meanwhile, she advances to attack, shouting for him to prepare himself. The attack misses Kyosuke because he dodges it, but it destroys the wall behind where he was standing. Soon, Lei Roxy asks what he thinks of it, stating that this is the culmination of his research. Then he advances, shouting that he will send him back to the afterlife once again, of death, again. With that, his fist hits Kyosuke's silhouette squarely, and it seems to have sent him flying with great force to the other side of the room with a single blow. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He then shouts about the saint of the pentagram saints, but the boy admits to himself that he doesn't know them either. The doctor. Blow. She then thinks that she has finally managed to win. Suddenly, she looks down and notices that an ice crystal trap has pierced her leg. Soon, the young man reveals that he set her up when she launched her attack. In disbelief, she screams and questions how he managed to do that. He explains that it's thanks to, because his minions had used the technique before, he discovered how the opponent utilizes body enhancement magic. Kyosuke admits that her drug is impressive, but all he did was create a gust of wind. Furious, she asks if he dares to mock the results of her investigation. He simply replies that she should stop talking nonsense. He then accuses her of trampling on people and having the audacity to call that progress. He concludes by saying that she disgusts him, leaving her speechless. With that, she prepares to advance once again. Furious, Lei Roxy screams at him to leave. He walks forward, preparing for one final blow. However, Yosuke effortlessly stops her attack, firmly gripping her arm. Then, he strikes her with a single punch, sending her flying backwards. The impact causes the dark energy to begin dissipating from her body. Fallen on the ground, She wonders why her power no longer works. With that, her transformation completely unravels, and she falls defeated to the ground. As he watches her, he thinks that this is Kyosuke's strength. Now, as he walks away, the young man tells his opponent that it was never real power to begin with. Already outside the building, he suddenly hears his name. He nods, saying that his confusion is natural, since he has only just regained consciousness. Immediately afterward, the doctor warns that he will do a complete examination and asks, being called. Turning around, he sees Ase and says he's relieved that she's okay, and she responds that he seems to be okay too. Just then, journalists arrive on the scene, confirming that the lei company was attacked, just as the complaint had stated. Asai then asks Kyosuke if he was the one who did it. Did that, but Kyosuke responds vaguely, saying, "Who knows?" Then, he reflects on how the truth about Lei's crimes had finally come to light. Guinea pigs are safe, and she has lost everything. While he observes the scene, the girl calls out to him again to get his attention, telling him that she doesn't quite understand what is happening, but that if it weren't for him, she wouldn't be there now. With that, Asai sincerely expresses his gratitude. The gesture causes Kyosuke to remember something he had almost forgotten entirely. He recalls how helping others used to mean everything to him. Later that day, night falls over the city. Then, a news report reveals that illegal human experiments were being conducted in a secret laboratory belonging to Lei Roxy. The reporter explains that the discovery occurred after Lei was apparently attacked by an unknown assailant. She concludes by stating that the executive shows signs of memory disorder, and the identity of the attacker remains uncertain. While the reporter wonders how others will react, the program is interrupted by a breaking news alert. The host announces that Nathaniel of the Pentagram SS has issued a public statement. Upon hearing him to wait while he prepares what is necessary. Alone, he wonders if the saint and the saints of the pentagram are clans or adventurers who emerged within. Name, Yosuke reacts, repeating in surprise that it is Nathaniel. On the screen, Nathaniel states that, on behalf of the Pentagram SS, he is there to deliver an urgent message, stating that he can only say everyone is devastated by the Lei Roxy incident. Nathaniel concludes by saying that, as Lei's companions, they feel deep shame for not having noticed Lei's descent into darkness. Kyosuke then questions whether they didn't notice it, concluding that the Pentagram SS will once again pretend they know nothing. Clenching the remote in anger, he concludes that this is exactly what they did 20 years ago. He then reflects that those people haven't changed at all and lie without blinking, all to protect their precious status as heroes. With that, he realizes that to them, people like Asai and himself were just simple stepping stones to power. Thinking of Nathaniel Cabell, he remembers that, based on his past actions, there's a high probability that he orchestrated their exile. Yosuke continues to recall that the man was always calculating and cautious, and until now, no one has discovered his whereabouts. Still, he decides that if that's the case, it's all right. Then, he grabs his cell phone and prepares to do something. Elsewhere, a woman dressed in white is kneeling in prayer in a grand cathedral. Soon, a messenger approaches and relays. That's what he said, addressing her as Lady Claudia. Claudia simply responds that she understands the situation. Then, she returns to praying, asking the Lord to guide them toward a future filled with light. Meanwhile, the last 20 years. Although leveling up is an obligation, he understands that he first needs to inform himself about current events. With that in mind, he takes a man named Lord F is informed, during his training session, that the council meeting is about to commence. He replies that he understands, and he will arrive shortly, while his subordinate apologizes for the interruption. As he gets up, he curses Lei, wondering what Lei was thinking. Finally, Nathaniel watches the other council members on a video call screen. He then announces that it is time to begin the council meeting. Pentagram S addresses everyone present, announcing the start of the meeting. Hello everyone, did you like the story? I loved it. If you want to, follow the next part. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys. Yeah. Remote control in hand to turn on the television. That day's special edition covers the SSS-class dungeon disaster from 20 years ago, and which he considers perfect for learning more about the incident where he was betrayed. The news report then reveals that the person responsible for the incident was the leader of the Golden Seekers, a level 100 user with a time attribute named Misato K. Icho. Unable to believe what he's hearing, he screams out in complete shock. Then he asks himself, what the hell does it mean that he's been pointed out as the culprit? The news continues, explaining that the other members of the Golden Seekers attack a defenseless civilian. Abruptly, someone struck the creature head-on, and the impact resulted in a massive explosion. Then, a man materialized at the scene, prevented him from using chaos to dominate the world. Thus, those great heroes, now known as the Pentagram Saints, defeated Misato and they successfully sealed the dungeon. The presenter concludes that, even to this day, the Saints of the Pentagram continue to lead the world in various fields. Immediately, the news program announces that it has invited specialists to debate the issue. Faced with such a farce, the reincarnated man cannot contain himself, and he begins to laugh bitterly. Then, he realizes that not only did they betray him, but they also dragged his dignity through the mud. With this, he understands that he was simply sacrificed by them. Afterwards, they shamelessly collected the rewards, being hailed by the world as so-called heroes. Gripping the remote control tightly, he swears that he will not forgive them. He soon reaffirms to himself that there is absolutely no way to forgive what they did. With the Arklet, his eyes filled with hatred, he promises to send them all to hell. Finally, he takes a deep breath to try and calm down for a moment. However, he concludes that he must be careful in his next steps. After all, he can't risk being detected by his former companion's radar. Remembering something, he grabs the cell phone that was on the table. He immediately begins to investigate which academy the boy attended and, with a smile, confirms that, just as he thought, the director of the academy is the Pentagram Saint, Ibako Jidaki. Then he celebrates his luck, because he already knows and inquired if everyone was all right. Introducing himself as Misato Kiyokiro, he declared that he would handle the situation from that point forward. He immediately turned to location of one of his targets as soon as he wakes up. However, he knows that the man is cautious and doesn't show his weaknesses easily. He recognizes that the difference in levels between them is too vast, making it impossible to defeat him right now. With that, he flops back onto the bed, frustrated by the situation. He concludes that there's nothing he can do at level 1, and decides to focus on leveling up for now while keeping an eye on him. Clenching his fist, he declares that Ibako must wait, because he will be his first target. A few weeks have already passed. Having recovered, he stretches and confirms that he can now move without any problems. The doctor, incredulous, says he can't believe he has fully recovered in such a short amount of time. While the doctor wonders if it was a blessing from the saint, Kyosuke interrupts him, saying it was nothing of the sort. Then, he states with conviction that it was all thanks to his own power. Immediately, he thanks the doctor for taking care of him, who in turn asks him to take care of himself as well. Outside, he observes the city and declares that he has finished his preparations. With that, he figures that his current level should be sufficient for the time being. With a confident smile, he decides that it's time to warm up by heading into a dungeon. In a previous conversation, the doctor reveals to Kyosuke that the entire family of the former owner of that body perished in an accident. Immediately after, he walks alone through the city. Then, he admits that he feels a little sorry for the Kosuke who was there before. Even so, he concludes that it's a good thing, because it now means that he can confront the horde of monsters, focusing energy into his hand. With a determined look, he braced himself for the attack. Shortly thereafter, he unleashed a barrage of do as he pleases. His steps come to a sudden halt. Standing before a portal, he wonders if this is the place he was looking for, with the goal of leveling up. Having leveled up and become stronger, he decides he wants to test his skills there. As he approaches the entrance, he presents his ID at the counter, but, however, a guard stops him, yelling for him to wait. Without getting upset, he simply asks, "What's the matter?" The guard then points to the ID, and he exclaims that his level is only 27, when the minimum level to enter in a group is 30. Immediately, the man asks if he plans to enter alone, but the boy responds that the level requirement only applies to normal cases, and yet he forcefully breaks free from the guard's grip. Then, he shows his ID, and states that as a student of the Adventurer Academy, everything will be fine if he signs the consent form. Then, he reveals that he researched this while he was at the hospital, leaving the guard speechless. Suddenly, a young man's voice tells someone to stop what they're doing. Yosuke turns around, towards a group of boys, and tells them that enough is enough. Their leader remarks that the guard was just concerned, and that a rookie like him should know his place. Yosuke simply observes the trio in silence. Ignoring the provocation, he turns back to the guard and confirms if all he needs to do is sign the document. As the man desperately tries to stop him, Yosuke begins signing the document. After finishing, He turns around and asks if there are any.